Welcome to the agenda. I am LASHA Kingsley in Douala, Cameroon. When the term fake news is mentioned, many people quickly think of the US President Donald Trump. The term became mainstream during the 2016 presidential elections when many websites published falsified and heavily biased information on their website. However, experts say the term fake news might be new, but it has been existing for centuries now. The only difference is the medium through which fake news is being propagated. With me today in the studio to talk more on this subject is a multi-award winning journalist who has been in the profession for close to 2 decades now. Harrison Tamfu is guest on the agenda. Harrison Tamfu, thanks so much for honoring our invitation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
So many international awards, 11 in number. What is your secret?
Well, first and foremost, the grace of God. And secondly, hard work and opportunities. No more, no less.
We are talking fake news today, and you happen to be one of those who have won an international award on fact-checking journalism. Fake news, if you like, call it propaganda, has been existing for centuries now. We equally have newspaper, radios, and television that have equally been existing. With the outburst of the social media, the society seems to be feeling the impact of fake news now than ever before. Why is fake news coming from the social media more dangerous than the fake news coming from radio and television?
That's an excellent question. And I think that this is one of the things that is causing a lot of havoc, not only in our country, but all over the world. The social media is far more dangerous because most of the people who practice journalism, in quote, on social media, are actually not journalists. You know, a journalist can be a blogger, but a blogger cannot be a journalist. And right now, the media landscape that reaches the people faster than any other thing is the social media. Even more than the television. You just need to put something on Facebook, and in no time, everybody who is connected to the internet is aware of that piece of information. And secondly, you have to just do whatever you have to do on WhatsApp, and it gets to everybody within seconds. You remember when the current conflict in the country started in 2016. It was propagated by social media very much from all over the world. Anybody in America or wherever can get to you easily. So you just have to lie on social media that LASHA Kingsley.
Why do people believe in the information coming from the social media?
To that. That's the first thing. That's what I want to make it do. They have access. It's so accessible. Not everybody watches news on television, especially in our communities. I'm talking about Cameroon. But almost everybody with an Android phone is connected to Facebook and WhatsApp. We don't have statistics in the country, but I can tell you with a certainty that the people who watch news on television are far less than those who are always on the social media, particularly Facebook, because Facebook is very popular in Cameroon. So that's why fake news is so much recurrent on the social media in this country because of accessibility. Accessibility. And on television, like in news, I don't know whether you have the possibility to know how many people watch your news on Prime Media and how many people, if you have a Facebook page, follow your Facebook page. You can do that comparison. You will understand better what I'm talking about. And like I said, a lot of people who publish information on social media are not trained, they are not professionals. So, and people are interested in...
Aris, before we continue, I want you to say in clear terms, to define in clear terms what fake news is.
Well, fake news is...
Because it happens, like, for example, like the recent flooding that happens on the new bridge recently here in the economic capital, Douala. A journalist published an information concerning that. He was lambasted. He was called all sorts of names. But recently we've had the Minister of Public Works publishing the same information, explaining to the Cameroonian people what transpired on that day. So what is fake news?
In very simple terms, fake news is that which is not true, that which is fabricated, and by extension is propaganda. Now, in our current dispensation in the country, fake news is what does not favor me. What favors me is news, and what does not favor me is fake news. That is why you mentioned the journalists that published the floods, published that the bridge on the Vuri, over the river Vuri was flooded, and people said it was a lie. Now you have to, I think that this happened on social media.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It did, right? If you look at the people who were saying that it was fake news, these are the people who did not like that kind of news. So in the current dispensation, what doesn't favor me is fake news. And what favors me is news. The war that is going on in the country now. If you are for the other side, for the separatists, and you hear that a soldier is dead, whether they're lying or not, that is news for you. And if you are against the separatists, when you hear that a separatist is killed and you're jubilating, you don't care to know whether it's true or not. It favors you. So,
I want you to reconcile fake news to journalists.
Well, when it comes to journalism in Cameroon, the biggest problem we're facing now is that we are not the ones propagating fake news. Our sources are misleading us. Look at the recent incident in the Adamawa region, where somebody faked his own
arrest or kidnapping.
He faked his up. He said he was adopted, and he called his family members and told them that I've been kidnapped by hoodlums and demanded ransom. And the family members had to pay a particular amount of money. I think it was 300,000 or something. We reported that the guy has been kidnapped. The guy misled us.
So who is to blame now in this situation?
The person to be blamed is the journalist, because before you publish information, you have to fact check. I understand that it's very difficult to fact check that information of that nature, of that magnitude, because you are not there to really know whether the person has been kidnapped or not. If I am, my family member calls me and he informs me that he has been kidnapped, and I call you, Kingsley, as a journalist to tell you that my family member has been kidnapped. I mean, if you are a fast journalist, you like breaking news, you break it immediately. But an intelligent and a smart journalist, we fact-checked. And this should be done through the recognized institutions, especially the police. Because it is true that our police force has some shortcomings, but not all the time. Most of the information that is coming from the police, especially information of this nature, is always true. And you can talk to the person who is claiming ransom, and then you listen to the way he's talking. If you're an experienced journalist, you will know when somebody is in distress and when somebody is not in distress. So we need to fact check as much as possible.
When you look at the Anglophone crisis and the journalists in Cameroon, especially the Anglophones, the Anglophone journalists, have they lived up to expectation when it comes to covering the crisis in the northwest and the southwest region?
there is much that we have to do. They have done much, I must say, but not much enough. To an extent, the coverage of the conflict is helping to compound the conflict, because we are not publishing information that is correct. Why? Because most journalists are not on the field. They are not in the conflict zones to really, investigate, to know what is going on. We can pinpoint, we can say this person went there, this person went there. Every day, especially, I know that you were talking about the English-speaking journalists, but the worst part is the French-speaking journalists who are in Yaoundé and here in Douala, and every day they publish information about the conflict in the northwest and the southwest regions.
So you think they're fake journalists? Are they fake journalists? Are you saying they are fake journalists?
There is a difference between fake journalists and fake news. I think you understand that. A journalist who publishes fake news is not necessarily a fake journalist.
Who is a fake journalist?
Is somebody who is not a journalist, who is not a professional, who is pretending to be a journalist. It's an imposter. You and I, we are journalists, like the incident that I quoted that happened in the Adamawa region. If we publish that information, does that make us fake journalists? It doesn't. It doesn't at all. When we talk about fake journalists, these are guys that are not actually journalists. They are there to propagate. They are there for propaganda, who are not trained, who have never practiced with absolutely zero experience in this profession, and they want to pretend to be journalists. Coming back to what I was saying about first-hand information, because this is very important when it comes to conflict reporting. You have to be on the field to know what is going on, to know whether what you are saying is correct or not. If people are saying that people are suffering in the bushes, and you have never been there, and you are reporting that people are suffering in bushes, what authority do you have to say that as a journalist? You have no authority.
Sourcing, the issue of sourcing comes in.
When it comes to investigative journalism, you need to be there. First-hand information, that's why I emphasize on that. Personal experience. You cannot stay here in Douala and somebody calls you from the bush and he tells you that, Kingsley, we are suffering in the bush, soldiers have killed us, or the separatists have killed soldiers, and bam, you go on the air to report about that piece of information. You are not a good journalist. And we have a lot of this kind of information from our colleagues from the French-speaking part of the country, French newspapers. So our colleagues from the French-speaking part of the country, they have a lot of work to do when it comes to covering the Anglophone crisis. You have the impression that they are completely disconnected from what is going on, and that's why I was emphasizing on the field-based journalism, to get the facts from the field, because a lot of these brings about fake news, and this doesn't help the country or the authorities to solve the problem. When you stay in Yaoundé as a journalist and your news comes from communiques from government authorities and other officials who have their own point of view, who are partisan, you can never report as a journalist. You will always be misleading the population, and the conflict will go on and on and on.
As a journalist who has won awards and international awards in fact-checking, what are you proposing to journalists so that we can have a kind of ecosystem of journalism that will promote truth?
First of all, personal effort is very important. It's extremely important. You, the journalist, you have to do everything possible on your own to fact-check your information. And the tools are there to fact-check information. If a piece of information is published, say an image or a video, and you are computer literate, you can easily go to Google and you Google that image or that video, and it will indicate to you where it is coming from. We have a lot of images coming from other countries, and people are connecting that to what is happening in the country. So that's the first thing you have to do. And you need resources to fact check. Or when I talk about resources here, I'm talking about financial resources, material resources. You need to be able to call, make phone calls at length to know what is going on, and meet people physically. And collectively, journalists can share information. You know, if I'm not here, most of my information I get with the current conflict in the country is from journalists that are based either in Buea or Bamenda, that I trust them, that I know are good journalists and that are professionals. You just have to call them to ask that, okay, we have heard that this man has been kidnapped, this man has been killed. Is it possible you find out this about? We find out this information, what is going on, and the person on the field can go to the residence of the person that has been affected to find out whether this is true or not. Like what happened with the children that were kidnapped from PSS and Quen. There was a lot of information, you know, about who has kidnapped them and where their whereabouts, here and there, and then you need journalists to be on the field to be able to tell you what is going on. So we need this collective action to be able to eradicate fake news when it comes to the coverage of...
Many journalists in Cameroon have been accused of practicing people-based journalism rather than practice issue-based journalism. What is your take on this, and what advice are you giving journalists in Cameroon as regard this issue?
That's true. What you have said is absolutely true. A good journalist should combine the two, should report about the issues and the people, and not about the institutions, because when you talk about people, you are talking about the institutions. And we get that a lot from French-speaking newspapers. You know, they just report about people. You just get up in the morning, and when Cardinal Toume, this is a good example, when he came up with the idea of an all-Anglophone general conference, you saw headlines in French newspapers. Le mast tombe déjà. That the Cardinal Toume est sécessionniste. I mean, this guy was covering the Cardinal, was covering what the Cardinal was talking about. And many newspapers publish this. This is unfair to the person. This is not even journalism, because it's defamation. If you are taken to the court, you will not be able to answer that. What makes you think? Because this is the thinking of the journalist. It's not even a fact. It is his own thinking. And the bad thing with this profession is that a journalist is not allowed to think. You report. You report about what is going on. Your opinion does not count. We don't have to know what you think about what is going on. That's why we have news reporting. That's why we have analysis. That's why we have a feature. This, you know, all combined together to form what is called news gathering and dissemination of information. When you put your own thinking, because how could these journalists talk about the Cardinal being a separatist? Because he is about to organize a conference that might eventually bring about the solution to the current impasse in the country. And he reported about the Cardinal, not about the issue. I mean, coming to what you were talking about, that people report about people and not the issues. You have to be able to combine the two. To combine the two, if something is happening, like what was happening at PSS in Quen, where those children were kidnapped.
You've been quoted by...
You have to, let me just say this, please, maybe so that You have to be able to report about these children. What happened? What are government officials saying? What are the separatists saying? What are the school authorities saying? Have you seen these children? Or their well-being? What is going on with them? You don't report about the moderator being a bad man. You know, you take a situation, people are interested in knowing where their children are. Parents are crying at home. They want to know what is going on. That's not news. That's defamation. You can, to an extent, quote that the moderator has confirmed that the children have been kidnapped. This is healthy journalism. This is journalism that promotes and upgrades a community.
You've been quoted by many as a good journalist, and you've equally been critical of the government when it comes to reporting about the Anglophone crisis. And you've equally been awarded by the United Nations about reporting on this the same Anglophone crisis. What is it that makes you a good journalist? Or what is it that makes a good journalist? A
good journalist has to be inquisitive, has to be neutral. Although this is a very difficult point, because neutrality is something that is not achievable. But a good journalist has to be inquisitive and fair in your job. And most importantly, and I think this is primordial, you have to separate your emotions from your work.
But many people have been arrested for reporting on the Anglophone crisis.
Yes, we will come to that. You have to separate your emotions from your work. Whether your mother has been kidnapped, you report that your mother has been kidnapped. That's a good journalist. You don't get emotional about my mother has been kidnapped, she was a good woman, you know, putting adjectives and then this is not journalism, it's something else. You are practicing propaganda or something. You must, especially with the current conflict in the country, you have to separate yourself, the journalist that Kingsley is, from Kingsley, the human being. You have to keep emotions aside. All of us are aware that the government is proving to be extremely intolerant and negligent in solving this conflict. This is an opinion. This is my opinion, by the way.
And you take responsibility for that.
I cannot, but it's obvious. Everybody knows about that. Even the government is aware. But I cannot report that the government, I mean, as a journalist, if I'm writing a report as a journalist, yeah, I cannot report that the government is intolerant, is intransigent, is negligent about the Anglophone crisis, is not interested in solving the conflict. That is not a journalist. I have to report what the government is doing and leave it at that level. People will now decide, you know, from the analysis to see whether if Paul Biya says, okay, I want these boys to disarm. If they don't disarm, I will kill them. I report that Paul Biya has said that these boys have to disarm. If they don't disarm, he will kill them. I stay quiet. That's journalism. If I start saying that he has not done this, he has been in power for this, he has been in power for this, and he's saying they should disarm, and he's not capable of, that's not fair. But I can go to, I mean, just to balance the information, because it's very crucial, especially in conflict reporting, to balance information. You cannot report only that Paul Biya has asked the boys
Does
to
balancing
disarm.
Information guarantees
you have to report
facts conservation?
You have to, well, it's not, when you report what somebody has said, it permits you, it permits you to stay away from any illegal or illegitimate behavior, because you are reporting what the person has said, although the law is very complicated in this regard. If you say something that is defamatory about the president and I report about it, if you are charged in court, I should equally be charged in court. And my editor, you know, it goes on and on. So the law at this level is very, very, it's not good. as far as I'm concerned on this point.
Harrison Tamfu, have you ever published information which turns out to be fake news? And what has been your reaction to such situation?
In my early years of journalism, I was misled with an event that I thought was meant for something else. But I realized after that it was not actually what was going on. You know, I reported about this event. I was doing a report on tuberculosis, the prevalence of tuberculosis in a certain community. I don't want to get into the details, but the people exaggerated the figures. That's why I was talking about the field first-hand information. They exaggerated the figures, and the people that were affected, you know, how the community was suffering. They exaggerated their misery, their plight, just to have a certain image and collect funds from somewhere. And I realized this. I was very sad because they used me. The information as reported was fake.
Before we end the program, I want to take this last question. What is your advice to Cameroonians who are on social media? What do you tell them regarding the consumption of information coming from the social media?
They have to know that 90% of what is on social media is fake. People tend to believe in what favors them, and they don't believe in what does not favor them. If you hear on social media that this is going on, you have to first and foremost put on your television. So watch the news to confirm, listen to the radio, and read the newspapers. This is very dangerous for Cameroonians. They don't read newspapers. They don't read newspapers, but they have to read. To confirm, you have to this traditional media to confirm that this is what is going on is actually true.
Harrison Tamfu, thanks so much for accepting to be guest on the agenda.
Thank you. I'm happy that you invited me.